Here we look at the lives of a tyrant king, a corrupt advisor, 3 future monarchs, and 6 women, some of whom had great injustices afflicted on them. This is Tudor England. It's another day like any other for the residents of London. But this day is of royal significance. It is the 28th of June 1491. A baby was about to be born. A baby that would grow up to be a ruthless tyrant. And one of the most talked about monarchs in world history.
This is Henry Tudor. Henry Tudor had taken the crown from King Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485. Richard was slain in battle. Henry Tudor was crowned as King Henry VII, the same year. Henry VII is known for ending the Wars of the Roses. With his wife Elizabeth he fathered 9 children, one of which would ensure the continuation of the Tudor dynasty. Henry was born in 1491 to Henry VII of England and Elizabeth of York. Little is known about his younger years. He had 6 siblings, although only 3 reached adulthood. His elder brother Prince Arthur was the heir to the throne of England but died at the age of 15 from an unknown illness. This made the 10-year-old Henry next in line to the throne. In his youth Henry was said to be a handsome, athletic man that enjoyed hunting, jousting and wrestling. Shortly after the coronation he married his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Catherine shockingly had been his brother Arthur's wife, but became a good match for Henry once he had died. In 1513, whilst Henry was in France, the English army crushed an invasion by the Scots at the Battle of Flodden. Catherine gave an impassioned speech about English courage and patriotism that is still remembered to this day. In 1516 they had a baby girl. She was named Mary and would later become Bloody Mary, Queen Mary I. They had 24 mainly happy years together. That was until Henry decided it was time to divorce and move on from Catherine. In 1533 Henry annulled his marriage to Catherine. It is said that Henry did this because he was desperate for a male heir and Catherine, now in her late 40s, could no longer give him one. Catherine died just 3 years later. Just months after the annulment Henry wed Anne Boleyn. They had been seeing each other in secret for some time now. Anne Boleyn had been a maid for Henry's first wife, Catherine. Henry had pursued her whilst he was still married to Catherine. The fact she was younger and more able to bear children and Henry's lust for her were without doubt the reasons for his divorce of Catherine. In September 1533, they had a baby girl whom they named Elizabeth after Henry's mother, Elizabeth of York. This baby girl would become Queen Elizabeth I. They did not enjoy married life, and refused to play the part of the submissive wife that Henry wanted. The marriage lasted 3 years. In 1536 Anne's brother and 4 other men were arrested on charges of adultery involving the Queen. Anne was also arrested accused of adultery and incest. It is believed that these were trumped-up charges. These charges were enough to have the Queen executed. On the 19th of May 1536 Anne was executed by having her head cleaved from her body by a swordsman on Tower Green at the Tower of London. The next day Henry got engaged to his mistress, Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour had been one of the Queen's ladies-in-waiting. They married 10 days later. The following year Jane gave birth to a boy. They named this boy Edward. This was to be the future King Edward VI of England. It was a difficult birth and Jane died of an infection a couple of weeks later. Henry pushed through laws that ensured that his son with Jane would be named as the heir to the throne. It wasn't long before Henry was instructing his chief minister Thomas Cromwell to find him a new wife. Cromwell suggested 25-year-old Anne of Cleves. Henry sent Hans Holbein the Younger to Cleves to paint a portrait of her for Henry to see if she was suitable. After seeing the portrait, Henry agreed to marry her. However, when she arrived in England and Henry saw her, he quickly changed his mind and had the marriage dissolved. It seems as though the Holbein portrait flattered her a little too much. Anne received the title of the king's sister and in subsequent years was on very good terms with the aging monarch. It was soon clear that Henry had fallen for the 17-year-old Catherine Howard, the Duke of Norfolk's niece. Around this time his chief adviser Thomas Cromwell was executed for treason. He was beheaded at Tower Green. On the 28th of July 1540, which was the same day Cromwell was executed, Henry married Catherine Howard. He awarded her Cromwell's lands. Soon after the marriage, however, Henry became aware of an affair between Catherine and a courtier called Thomas Culpeper. Henry had her executed as well as Thomas Culpeper and one other man involved. Henry married his last wife, Catherine Parr, in July 1543. Catherine, a wealthy widower with two previous husbands, enjoyed a close relationship with Henry's three children and was involved in the education of Elizabeth and Edward. Henry was now 47 years old and life was catching up with him. After a nasty jousting accident in 1536, his mobility had been compromised, causing him to be morbidly obese. He was also covered in pus-filled boils and possibly suffered from gout. Life was now very painful and uncomfortable for the old king. His temper had become violent and unpredictable. In January 1547, at the age of 55, King Henry VIII died. His extreme obesity and poor general health finally ended his reign. His sixth and final wife, Catherine Parr, had outlived him and remarried around 6 months later to a Thomas Seymour. This was her fourth husband. So King Henry was dead. He has become one of England's most famous monarchs. He had 6 wives, although thankfully not at the same time, and executed 2 of them. This fact often overshadows the massive upheaval Henry's severance with Rome and the Catholic faith caused, as well as the other important events that occurred during his tumultuous reign. All 3 of Henry's children became monarchs after him, namely King Edward VI, Queen Mary I, and Elizabeth I. The Tudor dynasty that his father founded has become one of the most talked about of all of the families to hold the English crown, with some of the most colourful kings and queens in British history.
Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Please like and subscribe.